let's take a look at the scoreboard. So the first thing that is interesting to look at is the actual raw score for every team. We see here Mayhem is in first. They're at the top. They have the highest score. Rubeus in second, Xandra in third, Megafish in fourth, Gema Galactica and Crispy trying to catch up. So the other thing that we can look at when we're looking in this view is that each of these cells here represents one round. And we see these, the green, blue, and red lines, just like before in Arena View. The green represents availability, blue is security, and red is evaluation. So we can see from the very beginning of the game, going on through, we can see the progress of each team. And one thing to notice as we look is that the last few rounds, Mayhem has been extremely solid in all three categories. It's one of the reasons why they've risen up to first place. We also see Megafish has been very solid the last few rounds, but because early on they patched so many of their services, they really took a hit on availability, and they were actually in last place back then, and they've actually risen up to fourth.
So that tells us the trends over the 10 rounds so far. But if we really want to dig into kind of where they're getting their points, it's hard to see from the bar chart. So I'm going to kind of focus over here instead at the cumulative scores. These cumulatives have the gray, which is the total points each team has gotten. It has, again, the same as before, the green for availability, the blue for security, and the red for evaluation. But now they're sort of normalized to a maximum. So whichever team got the most availability, in this case it's Mayhem, they're the ones filling out the green to the maximum. Whichever team got the most on security, which in this case looks like Xandra actually, it's close, but I think Xandra's a little more than Rubeus. Yeah, they're really both close up there. But Xandra has the best security, and the best evaluation looks like right now it is coming from Rubeus, right? So we can see where each of these teams get their strengths, where they've gotten their points from. If we look at these scores, we can see a couple things about the different teams. We can see that, like I said earlier, Rubeus seems to have a pretty solid security and evaluation. Both are very, very strong, but they're suffering definitely on availability. In fact, their availability is getting worse over time, where their green line is sort of trending down. So if we actually watch theirs kind of going down over time. On the other hand, Megafish started off with their poor availability, and then they're improving. So what is a poor availability? It can be a couple of different things. Availability has two components. The first component is that you have to be properly executing the program. You have to keep the original functionality.
So you can't replace the binary with a simple shell script that just returns the network header.
Exactly. You can't just return exit, trivially quit.
I'm pretty sure that's a technique I've seen being used in other CTFs.
I've probably done it in another CTF, but a good CTF, you'd have polls, right? So, and you wrote some of the challenges. So what did your polls look like? How do polls work?
Yeah, so as a challenge binary author, one of the things we had to create were poll generators. So the polls for CGC are actually dynamically generated to make sure that they exercise all the functionality of the service. So each one is going to be different, but they all exercise the protocol, whether it's an ASCII-based protocol or a binary-based protocol, through all the different ways that the program can be used.
So we hope that it exercises all the functionality. It doesn't let somebody just remove part of the program. They have to keep the original functionality in. So the other part of availability is their performance characteristics. So if you run too slow, if you use too much memory, you're going to get a performance penalty. And the performance characteristics were tightened. During the qualifying round, you had about a 10% sort of margin of free points you could spend, I guess, or 10% performance penalty you could take before it impacted your score. But for CFE at the final event, you only had a 5% performance window. So it was much more sensitive. This is similar to Microsoft's Blue Hat Prize, where they say, we want you to come up with protections, but you can't just implement a whole virtual machine that re-implements the entire program and runs it 10 times the performance.
And why don't we want people doing that?
Well, because no one would use our computers, right? Like we have to actually have computers that are fast. If we make things secure but way too slow, nobody's going to use them. So that was an important criteria, that we wanted real-world fieldable defenses, right? These had to be things that a user could use and they wouldn't be like give up and throw away the software because it was now too slow.
Yeah, and as we saw when we were looking earlier at the replacements, the teams that did generically sprinkle in those protections everywhere, they suffered score-wise.
They did, and so we can see that here. Actually, if you look in the availability of some of those teams that we highlighted, using a large number of generic defenses, we're seeing their overall availability go down. So maybe they're still successfully answering the polls, which is great. But if the performance uses too much memory or takes too long, that's still going to hurt their availability, which we see.
And that's an element of CGC that was a little different.